If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come, bring my spirits up. There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.
Welcome back to my coverage of the Kristin Smart trial, heading into Thursday, August 25th, 2022, in Salinas, California, the Monterey County Courthouse. It was another late start today. Court resumed at 10:30. Some days they start at 8:30. So not all days are full 8-hour days, and I'm grateful for that. I'm reflecting on how I've been a little tough on the jurors with all that's been going on, and I'm going to give them some credit here. You know my favorite is the jury questions, and they keep them coming strong. I acknowledge this has to be really hard for them. Feedback from those present watching the jurors mentions a few of them are very engaged and expressive. We'll hear another example of that in today's coverage of the trial. These jurors do need a brain break, so late start days should help. Yesterday, Wednesday, August 24th, court ended early at 2:30 as well. It's got to be a lot on them, especially when you're hearing sexual assault testimony, and who knows, out of all those jurors, who may be triggered or who has personally suffered sexual assault themselves. Don't forget the stats from our last episode, where 1 in 6 women have been victimized by rape or an attempted rape, not including the expected 80% of rapes that never even get reported.
The trials for Paul and Ruben Flores continued today. Jurors heard from a dog handler trained to detect human remains, who was one of many experts in the field that searched Paul's Cal Poly dorm room after the disappearance of Stockton native Kristin Smart.
Let's just say that today's testimony went to the dogs. Just kidding. So, the third dog handler with the fourth dog the search was on the stand today. And I'm going to just do some intros here, and then we'll head into the testimony. They did discuss how dogs are trained to locate pieces of human tissue, bone, blood, or the clothing of a deceased person who has been buried, or other locations that are not visible. We learned that dogs can't false alert. It's 100% or fail. We learned that the bones, the teeth, the blood, or tissue from a medical examiner's office, along with clothing that a person had died in, is used for training. And animal remains such as roadkill or cremations are also used to teach the dog on what not to alert on. Okay, back to the dog handler's testimony. It was interesting how yesterday they sprinkled in one of Paul's 3 sexual assault victims, and now we're back to the dog handlers. So Gail LaRouque, and hopefully I pronounced that right, and her dog Tori, her name sounds very French to me, by the way. They did another blind search, same as the other handlers who testified last week. Her dog was working the first floor of Santa Lucia Hall that June of '96 when Tori sniffed and alerted to Paul's dorm room. Unlike the other 2 dogs who searched, Tori alerted to both beds in the room and the trash can in the room in the beginning. Gail believed Tori was alerting on human remains. Tori is a full boxer, by the way. Such a good girl. And so far, all the dogs that were at the Cal Poly search happened to be females. And we already did a deep dive on that in one of the previous episodes regarding search dogs. Tori used a Bringsel to alert, and that is, they all have different alerts, and that's the way that Tori alerts. Dogs must pass a test each year by searching 3 different sites, all in 20 minutes. The dog must alert correctly on all 3 sites to pass, and 1 mistake is a fail. The dogs must perform in hot or cold, day or night. As always, the dog handler qualifications were extensively reviewed, almost exactly like the other dog handlers that have already testified. Tori has been used by multiple law enforcement agencies across California and the Office of Emergency Services. So very experienced dog. Gail started in 1992 as a dog handler. She did search and rescue before working the Kristin Smart case, and it was agreed by the court that she is considered an expert. Gail testified that Tori was hot and panting, so she cooled her off in the dorm shower to ensure that Tori was, quote, at her best to execute the search, end quote. Gail said she knew very little about the case at the time. Quote, I don't assume things on a search. I do what I'm asked to do. Gail went on further into the details of what went on during the search. She said she entered through a different door than the others, she realized later after the fact. The other 3 dogs all entered through the same door to the Santa Lucia dorm. Same as we heard about the other dog handlers, she gave Tori the command to look for human remains. Gail stayed back at the entrance while Tori searched. Gail described Tori doing what she calls a fish hook. Remember the other handlers described their dogs doing a U-turn in that very same hall? Tori's head went up, spun, and then she ran to the door and she was growling. She scratched on the door and used her special alert techniques, biting her brinzel and bringing it to Gail, showing she had detected human remains. They arrived at 1:30, by the way, and Tori first showed interest on the right side of Paul's dorm room. Her nose was still in the air, though, and so Gail knew Tori had not found her primary scent yet. Gail told her to go on. Tori went back and circled the room. Once Tori was at the left corner, she started to whine, indicating she had her scent. It was, quote, a very specific high-pitched whine. And she could tell that the primary scent was on the left bed frame and the left trash can. Tori was very excited. She smelled the carpet and scratched the carpet. She hit on a trash can in the left back corner of the room. Here's another suspicious slide where they're once again referring to human blood evidence from the mattress. Nobody in court yet has referred to it specifically as blood. I'm still waiting. Gail also testified that just like the other 3 dogs, Tori hit on Paul's room number 128 in Santa Lucia Hall. As previously mentioned, her dog hit on the bed, the trash can, the desk, and maybe the phone. Her dog seemed frustrated with almost too many scents to decipher the strongest scent, as Tori is trained to hit on. Gail interpreted the alert that the scent of human remains were stronger on the left side of the room. The scent was all over the corner of the bed. Tori ran her nose up and down, up and down. Per Detective Cole in the preliminary hearing in April of 2021, he stated that DNA does not exclude Kristin, and some of it is also inclusive, but the most recent lab results are not available yet. Ooh, I hope they're available now. Gail testified about Tori picking up a small gray trash can and bringing it to her. Then they took 2 identical trash cans, placed them on the hallway, with Paul's trash can as well. The dog hit on Paul's trash can, again, just like it had done earlier in the left side of the room, from room 128. Tori alerting 2 times on the trash can meant to Gail that there was deceased human scent on the garbage can. Handlers referred to this as a double alert. Gail asked Tori to search the hall again, and Tori stood up on her hind legs, smelled the door directly across from number 128, but did not alert. Well, it looks like Gail pissed Sanger off again when she described Tori's actions regarding Paul's room as, quote, I would interpret that as her searching for the boundaries of her scent bubble. Sanger loudly objected to that, stating, quote, there is no such thing, Your Honor. The judge overruled it and said the answer will stand. I may need to start a new segment dedicated to Paul's defense attorney, Robert Sanger, called Egg on Your Face. Sanger went down his same predictable path, trying to discredit CARTA and that it's just a volunteer organization and basically making it seem like it wasn't credible. He was trying to make it seem like they're an amateur, unofficial organization. And of course, Gail threw him some more twists. She explains that she volunteers, but was paid by FEMA when working there. Oopsie, Bob. Then Sanger makes a mistake of asking, quote, you are not a sworn peace officer, correct? Drum roll, please. She answers, quote, no, that's not correct. Her answer was, quote, "No, that's not correct. I was sworn by the Alameda County Sheriff's Office." Continuing on with Egg on Your Face with our host, Robert Sanger. Just kidding. Sanger asks, quote, "CARTA is not a government agency, is it?" Gail answers, "They are actually under the Office of Emergency Services." Sanger snaps back, "Ma'am, that's not what I asked." They are not getting along very well. Here they go tangling again. Sanger was trying to get her to admit that Adela Morris, the other handler who already testified, was the only one to sign her certificate when it was actually for others along with Adela. She was the last one to sign it. She was also certified by the Institute of Canine Forensics, which Adela founded, and the answer was yes. She was also certified by them. And he doesn't let up on this witness, and his frustration is shining through. Sanger tries to get her to admit alert by a dog isn't evidence, but only an inference. Gail answers, quote, "I'm looking for my dog to indicate that she smells human remains." I feel like this witness is really putting him in his place. I wonder if he regrets taking this case sometimes. Gail and her dogs were dealing with human remains on a regular basis, 4 to 5 days a week. Tori had a history of about 200 cases finding human remains. Tori also helped at a Nevada mine explosion, collecting evidence of 5 individuals, even though they were scattered. And Tori also found a pilot after a small plane crash in Gilroy, California. Tori has trained thousands of hours. Here's more of Sanger of what I call on the losing end. Question by Sanger. "You're aware that a dog can have false positives?" And Gail answered that she'd been thinking about that ever since he asked her at the preliminary trial. And she said, quote, "I personally have never had that experience." Gail takes control and asks Sanger to explain his definition of false positive. He says, "A dog alert where there's no human remains." He asks her, "Does that make sense?" And her answer is, "No." I'm happy the jury's staying awake today and possibly even entertained. Sanger asked Gail if her dog was friends with Adela's dogs, and Prevel objects and says, quote, "Objection. Dogs have friends?" I picture Sanger's face getting red, as it often does. The whole entire courtroom got a kick out of that one. They couldn't help but laugh. Even the judge was laughing at that. Dog friends. Continuing on with Gail's cross-examination by Robert Sanger, Paul's defense attorney. I have to say, this testimony is oddly satisfying. I feel like she's being brave, honest, and descriptive. Some sparks flew again in the courtroom today. I think this is one of the more exciting days so far, when Sanger asked Gail about the chemical compounds her dog was responding to and pointing out that she doesn't know what those compounds are. And Gail's answer was classic. She said she didn't know the chemical compounds of a cake either, but she knows it when she sees it. The jury laughed at that. And boy, did that make Sanger mad. He said, "Do you see a chocolate cake, ma'am?" And then he said, quote, "Do you think this is funny? This is a murder trial." Sanger did his best to try to cast doubt on the cadaver dogs alerting in Paul's dorm room. I don't feel like he was very effective, in my opinion. Ruben's attorney, Mr. Misek, showed up today. Just kidding. He's always there, but he's only defending Ruben, so he doesn't have a lot of role to play in the courtroom. He sits and listens mostly. Okay, so on cross-examination by Misek of Gail LaRouque, and hopefully that's pronounced correctly. It sounds French like I said before, but moving on. I'm going to refer to her as Gail as I have been. It's easier because I know I'm not mispronouncing it. He is defending Ruben as accessory after the fact, by the way. So Misek asked Gail if she believed Tori was infallible. And she answered, quote, "Not infallible, just honest." Interesting. Both defense attorneys also asked her about red tape on Paul's dorm room. And I noticed that the tape in the episode where I found those screenshots is yellow. So that was a little weird. They might have just done that for the program. I'm not sure. I'm assuming what the color discussed in court is accurate. It was probably to reenact or something. She also did not recall seeing red tape on any other doors in the building. I'm 100% sure this is the most we've heard from Meesick so far, and we are 6 weeks into these trials, actually. Gail did not agree with Meesick's claim that dogs are only as good as their handlers, so I'm going to call that strike one. Gail did not agree with Meesick's claims that only tangibles are used in training, strike two. Gail further clarifies that they often bury an item and remove it, and during searches the dog still hits where the item was, even though it's no longer there. Ouch, I bet he regrets asking that question. Here's a third and final strike, in my opinion. Gail did not agree with Meesick's claim that the dog may have been interested in something else. Gail said an alert is, quote, "only if it contained the scent of human remains," end quote. What do you guys make of this? I always assumed Sanger and Meesick would work on the same side, so to speak. Assuming can be so off. Meesick asked the following question, quote, "You said your dog showed frustration." Sanger actually objected to that. It was weird. It was against another defense attorney. I'm sure it's happened, but it's just not familiar to me. He stated there was no basis. Meesick withdrew the question. Next question was about how long organic compounds remain in the atmosphere. Sanger again, objection. No foundation, which was sustained. Gail had a long day on the stand. She was on the stand until 4 p.m.
His attorneys have consistently argued that he is innocent and point to the fact that Smart's body has never been found. But experts like the handlers say their trained canines alerted to the scent of remains in Flores' dorm room and on or near his bed. Evidence the prosecution argued proved that Smart was in Flores' room but was not alive.
Although it was late in the day, the remainder of the afternoon was spent questioning a former girlfriend of Paul's. And I can't wait to hear this. I've always wanted to hear from her. She dated Paul for 2 years in the early 2000s. She spoke to the court about visiting Ruben's house, walking to get an avocado off the tree because they were her favorite, and she was quickly redirected to the front of the house. She said it was obvious Paul and Ruben didn't want her back there. The mood immediately changed. Angie Curizel, possibly pronounced incorrectly, I'm just going to refer to her as Angie throughout this. She was described with dark hair. She's from Lawndale. She mentions being greeted by the family's 5 golden retrievers just before Paul and Ruben shooed her away from the area and redirected her. She testified that she met Paul's father and mother and Mike, Susan's long-term boyfriend, while visiting AG. They even stopped by Susan's house, Paul's mother. Angie described the outlay of Ruben's home by describing how, quote, she walked through the living room, through the dining room, and then went out a sliding glass door, end quote. She described the backyard area as, quote, there was a slab of concrete and a wraparound porch or a deck with white lattice underneath it, end quote. When Angie was asked how the mood changed, she responded, quote, they did not want me there, end quote. She testified she was approximately 9 feet from the deck when she was directed away from the area. She said Ruben seemed upset. She said Ruben was rude during the visit, and she said she didn't think Ruben liked her very much and that she was never invited back after she was asked by Purville. Let me explain a little here. I often forget that not all of us know this case as well as some of us. I want to link the importance of what Paul's ex is saying. This location under the deck behind the latticework is where the prosecution says they have proof Kristin was buried temporarily before she was dug up and relocated decades later. after law enforcement came with a search warrant for the homes. Ruben's house is worth over $1.5 million today on a dead-end street of custom large homes on acreage. The house is 12 miles from Cal Poly, where Kristin was last seen alive. And in March of 2021, the casket-sized hole with human blood and fibers consistent with Kristin's last outfit were found in the hole. Side note, I remember in past interviews with Angie, she talked about what a crappy boyfriend Paul was. He was aggressive with her, especially sexually. He was a big liar, no surprise there, and he cheated. I can't help but think the cheating was more like date rapes. In my opinion, Paul didn't want sex given willingly. He seems to prefer to take it by force, in my opinion. Once again, this is just based on the evidence and interviews and accusations over the years. Continuing on with Angie's testimony, she said she didn't realize the significance until 2 years later, after her and Paul broke up. She discovered Paul was a person of interest in Kristin's disappearance. Okay, hold on a second. Doesn't that just give you goosebumps? It does me. I used to trip on anybody dating Paul. I would wonder if it could be possible that due to the geographical distance from where this all happened, that a girl could be oblivious. Now we know that was the case here from her own mouth. Scary. During part of Angie's cross-examination with Robert Sanger, Paul's defense attorney, he asked her if Paul and Ruben could have possibly been redirecting her so she didn't step in dog poop from one of the 5 dogs on the property. Now, is it just me, but isn't 5 dogs a bit much? It makes me wonder if they were guarding Kristin's grave, which is so morbid. Angie wrapped up the day's testimony, and she was expected to be back on the stand at 8:30 Friday morning to continue her cross-examination by Robert Sanger. All right, we're heading into Friday morning, August 26, 2022, wrapping up week 6 of the Kristin Smart trial. Angie, Paul's ex-girlfriend, was briefly on the stand again Friday morning, and during that brief testimony, she revealed to the court that during this trip, she discovered that Paul's parents were paying his bills for him. Okay, now I've heard this many times in the past, but now we get to hear it from an actual witness. Paul's parents have enabled him his whole life. It's a cautionary tale, parents. Don't enable your kids. There, I got that off my chest. Once Angie said that she realized that Paul was not paying his own bills, Sanger loudly objected and said, quote, "I have a very specific motion." And judge called a 5-minute sidebar in the hall. Angie was excused at 9:10 a.m. Once she was excused, Judge O'Keefe announced a 90-minute delay, giving the attorneys time to prepare for the next witness due to some new evidence being presented that could cause a delay. Did you catch that? New evidence after 26 years. Wow, 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 wow. Remember, we heard earlier in the testimony that some labs were not done, meaning the lab results were not in yet. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait. So during the 90-minute delay, Judge O'Keefe said, quote, "The attorneys will be working very hard to make this seamless, and court will resume at 10:30. Remember, it was 9:10 at that time. Well, that didn't work out. So this week, it ended up that they were only in court Wednesday the 24th, Thursday the 25th, and just part of Friday morning the 26th. As I previously mentioned in my intro, juror breaks could be good and may reduce unexpected juror delays. This time, it has nothing to do with them. I hope we hear what this evidence issue is now that we are getting more and more access and transparency. Once again, everyone was ready and present when Judge delivered the news, which I find very annoying. The judge basically came out and said she has some good news and some bad news. Said there's going to be another delay and that the trial is making good time and that it's out of her control. So I'm wondering if maybe it's time to link Kristin's grave to the avocado tree. I'm just trying to figure out the new evidence with the timing of the testimony. You know how curious I am. So anyway, court is said to be set to resume Monday morning, August 29th at 8:30 a.m. Hopefully the quote-unquote evidence issues will be resolved by then. I'm guessing it's related to Angie's testimony, which centers around Kristin's burial location. That's just my guess. I look forward to it. It seems like a good time to connect the dots of where Kristin ended up for a time, since we covered when she vanished, and who she was with, how incapacitated she was, and how Paul really seems to appreciate that in a girl. He's so sick. Holy cow, Monday may be one of those bombshell days. They couldn't even get the evidence together? And it's new evidence? Oh my. We've got some more tidbits here. And this first part's related to Mr. Misek, who's Ruben's attorney, who we don't hear much from. But I came across this Twitter slide that struck me. And they're complaining that Ruben is bleeding money per Misek. Quote unquote, bleeding. I mean, what a flippin' term to use. In a murder case, words have power, and attorneys of all people should know to choose their words wisely. I'm not impressed. Misek is not a high-powered attorney, unlike Sanger, which, to me, he proved it today in his cross-examination of the dog handler. Robert Sanger, Paul's attorney, has had several high-profile cases, including his successful representation of Michael Jackson during the child molestation charges. Misek became a lawyer later in life. Here are some of his previous careers. He was an enlisted man. He was a firefighter for the university and for the city of Davis, and a building inspector for Northern California in the 80s and 90s. He went to law school at night and started practicing law in 2003 before moving to San Luis Obispo and opening his practice there. He claims to defend the underdog. We are already aware about the 3,000 pages released due to the motion filed by the Media Coalition, and as of today, August 26, 2022, Friday, it looks like they are filing a new motion where they want Judge O'Keefe to allow video for the trial. More specifically, to allow audio and video recordings of the closing arguments and also the reading of the verdicts. The letter to the judge by multiple media outlets says that Judge O'Keefe indicated that she could modify a rule that blocks courtroom video depending on specific circumstances. The media group proposes using one single pool audio-visual recording. Oh, yes, please, please. I'm definitely here for that. All right, we've got some more juicy unsealed documents. This is for a motion unsealed, motion by the prosecution back June 23rd, 2022, and it's related to Paul's original attorney, Mr. De La Motte. We talked about him in a previous episode, and it appears for many years that he was approaching the district attorney, trying to get an immunity deal for Paul, saying he could lead them to Kristin's body for a plea bargain of involuntary manslaughter. These plea arrangements were continuing through the year 2010, and for those of you who have been following the case closely, you might recall that Mr. De La Motte was no longer an attorney as of 2007. So that's a little curious, and this person's comment, he or she also caught on to that. You'll notice at the bottom of this page that it does point out that if Paul was not criminally involved, there would be no need to bargain for a plea deal. Wow, imagine that. From here, I just have additional comments related to the plea deal. It's always interesting to see what others are thinking and what others have to say. Grateful Girl here touches on the way the Flores family tried to portray themselves as victims. That should tell you all you need to know about them. She says they're disgusting. Black Wingy mentions how they play a victim and it's all they know and how they got through life. and talking about how they whipped up righteous anger towards Kristin and her family because it's all their fault. Seriously? Stern's shot here is upset because they feel like the jury should be privy to this information regarding Paul trying to get a plea bargain and leading them to Kristin's body. Poop here says that either way, he would have been back on the streets raping women, and maybe we have a chance this time to put him away for the rest of his life, sparing all his future victims. And by the way, I like Poop's comments. They always have good, concise, helpful comments. Difficult Law 5 comments on how it's not a preserved body, of course, and best case scenario it would be a complete skeleton, but most likely is disposed of in a way where it won't point back to them. And of course, rumor has it that her bones have been scattered out in Wasna area, which we've gone to check out there multiple times. But don't forget the human body has over 206 bones, not including teeth or the small sesamoid bones. So that's a lot of bones. Nerwin here comments that they believe that her remains have been destroyed. Fresh Start wants to know why the plea deal didn't go through. And the commenter answered saying that Paul didn't want to spend 7 years in prison. He wanted to tell them where she was and to walk free. Apparently, in 2010, a member of the Flores family rejected an 8-step plea deal. Maybe with further unsealed documents, we'll be privy to what the 8 steps are and the official outcome.
Trial will continue tomorrow morning.
As always, justice for Kristin. And I just want to remind everybody that she was a little girl who grew up to be a young woman, and then her life was ended. We can't forget her.
If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come.
Thanks for watching.
Bring my spirits up.
Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers.
There's some shit I like to fix.